What up, y'all? Welcome to part one, where we're going to go ahead and cover the basics of navigating in the viewport in Blender, as well as some basics such as moving our object, scaling it, and rotating it. So first things first, let's go ahead and open up Blender if you haven't, and you may have a scene like this. Now mine is usually just with the cube, but I added the camera and light to simulate when you start up Blender for the first time. You want to make sure you're in box selection mode here, so if it's not this, you want to just hit W until you cycle through and go to box selection, and you want to go ahead and select the two objects. You can also click on one and then hold shift key and left click on the other to select multiple. And you can also select them here as well and just hit the delete key. That'll get rid of them. So now we should just have the basic default cube. Now what we're going to go ahead and do is, before we go ahead and learn some basic navigation, let's say just out of nowhere your 3D cursor kind of went out here, because the 3D cursor is kind of important, but we're not going to talk about it right away. In case this does happen by accident, you can hold the shift key and press C as in Charlie on your keyboard, and that's going to gain focus back to the center of the viewport. Pretty much if your object's in the center, it's going to center around there as well. So now that should be back where it's supposed to be, and we can go ahead and start. Now, the main thing you want to learn first is just how to zoom in and out, get closer to your object and further away from it. Pretty simple. It's just going to be mouse wheel, so you're going to scroll in and scroll out. So scroll in and out, get used to that. Then we're going to learn how to pan. So if you hold the shift key and press your middle mouse button down, then you move it in whatever direction, left or right, up or down, you're going to be able to pan in that direction. Now, to rotate around your object or the scene in general, you're just going to press and hold the middle mouse button itself, and then go ahead and move it, whether it's left or right, down or up. You can go ahead and rotate in whatever direction you need to. So with a combination of all three of these, you should be able to navigate around and see your object, and this is going to help because if you don't know these basics, well, you're not going to be able to model anything. So that's pretty much all you need to know for navigating around your viewport and looking at your object. Now let's go ahead and select our object. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and learn how to move our object. Now there's two ways of moving your object and scaling and rotating as well. Right here we have manipulators for moving, rotating, and scaling. So you can click on these and it'll change manipulators that you can use to manipulate your object's movement, scale, and rotation. So here I can go ahead and click on the blue arrow for the Z-axis to move it up and down. And let's say I accidentally left click and I didn't want to do that, just do Control Z and it'll go back. You can also, as you're moving it, right click and it'll put it back to place and cancel your action. So you can use these arrows to move your object around. Now, scaling and rotating is also the same thing. You can rotate it on whatever axes that you need to, and scaling as well. But let me show you an easier way to do that. Now, some people, it depends, you may prefer this method. But if you're a person who just rather use your keyboard, you can just press the G key on your keyboard and press either X, Z, or Y, depending on the axis you want to move in. So in this case, I'm just going to press Z, and now I can move in the Z axis. I didn't have to use a manipulator. I can easily just use my keyboard. So I can do G and X to move it on the X, and G and Y to move it on the Y. Same thing goes for rotation. To rotate your object, you can hit R, and that'll rotate it depending on where you're looking at. But if you want to constrain it to an axis, I can hit Y for the Y, X for the X, and so on. And scaling is the same thing. So hitting S on your keyboard will scale, and it'll scale everything by default, but you can hit X, Y, or Z to scale it on that specific axis. And that's pretty much it. That's all you need to know for right now in terms of navigating and just slightly manipulating your object to kind of change its shape and move it around a little bit. So thank you for watching. In the next part, we'll go ahead and cover some of the 3D modeling basics. So let's get to it.